So Fragrance du Bois is a house that I personally love. I have a lot of their offerings and I've purchased many throughout the years. Here's a fragrance called Oud Bleu Intense. Now, of course, with a name like Oud Bleu, it sounds like a bit of a juxtaposition because oud is typically on the heavier side of things, but blue is often an adjective being used to describe lighter, fresher, more oceanic fragrances. So is this one going to be a versatile creation that can be enjoyed in all seasons and all occasions, or is it going to be on the heavier side of things? I'm excited to give you my thoughts on the fragrance, so make sure to stay tuned. Begin my fragrance review of Oud Bleu Intense by Fragrance du Bois, and I tell you all about this fragrance, the smell, the longevity, comparisons to any other fragrances on the market. I do want to start things off by mentioning that if you are a fan of fragrance related content, please do consider supporting this channel by subscribing to it. Hit that bell icon so you can be notified whenever I do upload future fragrance related videos, and of course give this video a thumbs up if you take something of value from today's episode. Now, looking at the note breakdown for this fragrance, it's actually far more complex than I imagined. The perfumer for this is Guillaume Flavigny, a super accomplished perfumer. He's made fragrances for Fragrance du Bois, The Harmonist, so on and so forth. I've even done an interview with him on Instagram Live quite a bit of time ago. And this fragrance, in addition to that oud note, also has a lot of ambery facets. So there's an amber accord in here. There's also myrrh, olibanum, otherwise known as frankincense, labdanum, if I'm not mistaken, but there's also a bunch of spices. So there's nutmeg, cardamom. So I think in terms of that description, we can pretty much assume that this is going to lean quite a bit on the heavy side of things. And I do think that there is a level of versatility in this, despite the fact that it has all of those dark, heavy ingredients. There's a bit of orange in the opening, which I think is a really nice complement to the amber. In any case, I'm excited to get in a little bit more detail in regards to the smell. Let's start things off with the presentation. So the first thing that you'll notice in the opening of this scent is this sweet amber accord. And it's such a warm and sweet amber accord, especially in an olfactory landscape where a lot of ambers can be a bit on the balsamic side. Some of them can be spicy. Some of them can be quite dark and smoky, depending on the resins that are used. Galbanum can be green, labdanum can be sweet, benzoin can be a little medicinal. So you have a nice combination of all of those ingredients, but you also have this vanilla ingredient in here that I think adds to the amber accord. So whether or not vanilla is explicitly listed as a note, I can see it's doing something really interesting here. Now, whenever you combine vanilla with some type of a citrus, I can't help but think of a lot of Sarah McCartney's creations. She's another perfumer who is quite talented at what she does. She has a brand called 4160 Tuesdays London. And so it kind of has like this bright, zesty, warm, orangey thing happening in the opening, but it also has this warm, ambery quality in the base that I think is a perfect pairing to that bright citrusy opening that you're going to get. Now, at no point does this smell, you know, fresh or oceanic or anything like that. And so you can kind of dispel that misnomer, especially if you looked at the name and you're like, oh, blue, this is going to smell aquatic or whatever. It totally doesn't. It just has this warm, ambery, incensey quality without necessarily smelling smoky, which is something that a lot of incense fragrances do have. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't mention another ingredient that is really obvious to me, just smelling it off the test strip here, and it is the note of cardamom. Now, cardamom is a very unique ingredient that, you know, is found in some designer fragrances, La Nuit de l'Homme by Yves Saint Laurent, but it's also found in a lot of niche offerings as well. There's a Parfum de Marly that has a nice bit of cardamom in it. I think it's called Byerly. And then I think cardamom is also found in Minuit et Demi. And so it's one of those spicy ingredients that one can come across smelling very refined, elegant, and professional. It can also come across smelling very exotic and sort of, you know, enchanting in that way. So it has this duality of personality about it that I think is really cool and really interesting. But in this case, it comes across smelling more exotic. And the reason I say that is because it has a lot of other exotic ingredients in here, specifically the resins like the benzoin, the labdanum, and that nutmeg, cardamom thing that's happening in the opening actually does create this luminous appeal to the fragrance. It's really, really nice. In terms of a dark ambery fragrance, of course, there's other fragrances like New York Intense. That fragrance is much more on the dark side of things. You know, that fragrance is a lot more resonant and mysterious. This one has a touch of sweetness to it that I think makes it accessible and also creates this mass appeal to it while still having that niche quality, so to speak, with the amber and the resins and some of these other seemingly darker ingredients. So I really do enjoy the complexity of this fragrance. I like that it utilizes some ingredients that many designer brands don't dare to mess around with, right? This one does take it in a rather dark direction, but it's dark without being challenging, and I love that. I do think this is one of the easier to wear Fragrance de Bois fragrances while also capturing that oud aesthetic that you're typically going to find in a Fragrance de Bois perfume. And of course the agarwood is in here. It's of the natural variety from what I'm given to understand, but it's also an agarwood ingredient that is very accommodating. And I say that to say that, you know, there are a lot of agarwood ingredients in perfumes that can be a little bit animalic, and I don't necessarily get that from this fragrance. Now, given the benzoin and perhaps some of the other darker ingredients, that personality of the agarwood could have been brought out and could have been a bit more animated, but it seems to be rather subdued. But you do have this warm, even textured, woodsy base that I think does a lot of really nice things to the fragrance. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. So first up, in terms of the uniqueness in the overall smell, sure, there are a lot of other spicy and ambery fragrances out there, but there's still something about this fragrance that keeps it smelling unique, and I really appreciate that level of uniqueness. Overall smell, I think it's going to be very warm and inviting, and there's something sweet and creamy in the opening of this fragrance that I truly love. However, I do think that if you're the type of person who is a fan of aquatic, oceanic, citrusy fragrances, this one might be a little bit too much for you. So definitely sample before you buy. Longevity on it was 10 hours on my skin. Projection was amazing for the first hour and a half of application. It did start to sit a bit closer to the skin, right around that 7 to 7.5 hour mark. Versatility is great. I think you could pull this one off in every season except for the summertime. Perfectly unisex. It will probably appeal to somebody who's a little bit older, but I can see the sweetness appealing to somebody who's a little bit younger as well. But there is a lot more going on in here. It's a rather complex fragrance, and this is definitely a formal occasion scent, not just in terms of the price tag, but also in terms of the overall vibe that it conveys. Presentation on these fragrances, this brand, you know, the presentation is really outstanding. My final verdict on this fragrance is, if you are a fan of ambery and incense fragrances that are very complex in terms of the amber notes, you want something that is made by a very talented perfumer and also something that has a bit of sweetness to it, definitely check out Oud Bleu Intense by Fragrance de Bois, and I sincerely hope you love it. So there you have it, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. That was my review of Oud Bleu Intense by Fragrance de Bois. If you own or have tried this scent, let me know what you think. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to support the channel by subscribing to it. Love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.